can't see your full face either.
That's so weird.
Okay, wait, can you get the music going? Because my music.
Yeah. Without further ado, okay, let's get started.
Let's just start. Let's get started. We don't know if anybody else is going to join us today, so we're just going to get started.
Oh, we got one person. Oh my God, Sarah. Okay, so
Thank you for joining.
I got excited for a second. Sarah, give us a thumbs up if you can hear this jam right now. Can we get a thumbs up, Sarah? Or unless I'm the only one hearing it. You can hear it? Okay. Yeah. Eres Molina. Stand by Aceros. Okay, about 15 more seconds and then we'll get down to business, okay? Hello.
Hello.
Okay, I'm going to fade this out. Okay, so we just want to do a little bit of housekeeping before we jump into the topic. Hey, Boo.
Hey, Boo. How you doing? Joining us today.
Just for the record, in case you didn't know, all those people out there, just kidding, Zyra. We want you to know that we are 2 licensed clinical social workers that met in grad school. We're friends, and we're here talking about mental health, relationships, sex, parenting, and simply being a person of color with our never-ending to-do list. And today, specifically, infertility.
Today specifically, all topics discussed are for entertainment and informational purposes only. The content that we discuss is not considered to be a substitute for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your mental health professional or health provider with any questions, and never disregard any professional advice because of something that you hear from me and Linnea.
Right. And Zyra is actually an aspiring social worker, so she's getting her MSW, and so it's good for her to hear, like, you know, that legal jargon that you never imagined one day you would have to, like, say out loud.
Yes, confidentiality is everything. Disclaimers is everything. Making sure that you're communicating what your liability is everything. Right? Law and ethics. Woo woo. Oh. Anyway, so it is not about law and ethics. We can maybe do another one about that next season. But today we're here to talk about infertility, especially in communities of color, with Black and Brown people more specifically, and just from the experiences that we have seen from our peers. The reason we picked this topic is because in our very first episode, we made a huge announcement about my beautiful co-host.
I'll just, you know,
give you guys a belly update that the belly's pretty good.
I'm sitting on my pregnancy pillow in my bed, or else I would totally show the belly. But yeah, I just want to also underscore and piggyback on what you just said, like, and we talked about how we love titles, but the title is Prodded and Loss. Infertility realities need to be talked about more, so here we go. So all that's true. And right before the episode, Lauren and I were talking about how it's, like, really this, like, larger umbrella. It's not just like, oh, IVF and, like, people, like, that just can't have babies. It's a whole world of, like, not being able to see a pregnancy come to fruition naturally, and the loss that really is associated with that.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because as we were preparing for this episode, one of the things that I thought about was actually something that was one of the first real pieces of literature that I read in social work school, and it was about it was the title of the article was called Childless. It was called Biological Childlessness. And I didn't really understand the topic then as much as I do now. And the idea of it was behind couples who had gone through series of IVF and different fertility treatments and still having a real struggle with being able to maintain their pregnancies. And and ended up choosing to have children in various different ways that were not biologically, with them holding their own children or becoming parents in that way. And I just think that in our communities that it's so important for us to be able to talk about, how to be able to become a parent if you want to become a parent, but you're having issues with your fertility as well.
And can I say it's another system within, like, when you think about systematic racism and the cost of infertility drugs, you think about like who can afford and who has the insurance and who has the access to the medical care that is like very, very invasive, high tech, that requires you to have comprehensive coverage. And even if you have that, you're paying out of pocket, which is also not something that like a lot of people know.
Thousands of dollars out of
Uh,
pocket, not like a $50 copay. Like the amount of money that most people are paying out of pocket is astronomical, right?
I know people who are like, they pull out of their retirement, like, or they like pull out of like a savings that they had. And so, first of all, just to be able to have a fund of money that you can pull from is like not something everyone has access
No,
to.
they definitely don't, especially our clients in our regular practices, right?
Yeah. So, what's it like if you're low income and you also are having trouble conceiving, in the traditional way?
I think that it's one of the things that, especially because you do have to have health insurance for you to even be able to get this service or access to it as well. It really does limit the options because when you think about systems like Medi-Cal or other larger, kind of government funded subsidies, they're not paying for you to have more kids, right? Even if you think about how people are talking about pro-life, pro-choice, and how those laws are actually made and enacted to be able to make stances with healthcare, it just blows my mind, right?
Totally. Totally. Um, I also think that right before we got on, we always do this. Lauren and I get on and we start without recording. We start talking about everything we should be talking about while we were recording, um,
Oh,
all the time. But we are mental health practitioners, and this entire experience, whether it's not being able to be pregnant, having a miscarriage, or losing a baby after birth, it's all a grief and loss experience. And that's sort of like, I think, why we have a stake in it as mental health providers, is that it really takes a giant toll. I can say firsthand, I have a friend who I'm pretty sure she'll be okay with me saying this is why I'm saying it, and I love her and she's one of my best friends. But about a month before I found out I was pregnant, ready to share the news, she was pregnant with twins, and she did a gender reveal and was super excited in knowing it was a high risk pregnancy. And then like the very next weekend she lost the pregnancy. And she is now very like open and willing to talk about how hard it's been, but it's been really hard, like really, really hard. And grief and loss throws you into directions you don't even know that you're capable of going. And if you've never experienced clinical depression or anxiety before, like often you're having those symptoms and it's really unrecognizable and really like uncomfortable. So that's like when we talk about unspoken stuff, I feel like that piece of how the woman in isolation typically has to heal, when everyone kind of goes about their normal life, like, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. And then you're still there dealing with all the emotions.
yeah. It's interesting that you talk about something that happens kind of early term, right? Where I know people who have just had, I feel like it's so interesting. One of the things I tell somebody is that when you first get pregnant with your very first baby, you have all this hope and ideas, and you don't really think about all of the things that could go wrong, especially if it was something that was an easy experience or that you didn't have to, especially for like people who are not consciously and actively pursuing like pregnancy, right? So I think that there's something about or child rearing, and so I think about what it takes for, and we're talking about like cisgender, like kind of just very heteronormative discussion that we're having at this point in the conversation, but there's a part of it that you don't have to bring that in, right? That comes with knowing that there are people who intentionally want to be able to get pregnant, and that there's so many steps that they have to be able to take to get there, right? But I also feel like in the converse that so many of us that live in a heteronormative lifestyle, that we've been taught like to prevent pregnancy for so long, because you have to be able to meet, I know especially in the Black community, you have to be able to have your degree, have a job, have a partner, and like there's this idea of like being able to do it in some type of order that doesn't always necessarily happen. And so I feel like there's been so many of us that like feel like when they were pregnant in their youth that they couldn't keep the pregnancy because they had to terminate because they weren't in a good place in their life, because they didn't have all of the boxes checked off, right? And then they decided not to, but now in their 30s they have a different viewpoint on life, and they're open to being able to have a baby, and they're having issues with their fertility and maybe feeling just kind of, or having a difficult time being able to get there. I don't know if I'm even being clear in that thought, but those are all the thoughts that are swarming in my head when I think about it.
Yeah, and I think to your point of like being not ready yet, and so choosing termination as an option earlier in life is sort of like this, if you are pro-choice, more accepted way of doing things, and it doesn't minimize how you might react or how that might affect you, even if you weren't ready at the time. And I love the apparently I self-disclose at every session, so I will self-disclose that I have experienced terminations prior to like having my first child. And oh God, I can just think one guy was so dreamy, I would have loved to have his baby, but it just was not the right time.
It wasn't the right time. It wasn't. The baby would have probably been beautiful, just like the one we have now. But
it was still, there was like unexpected loss that grief that I experienced during that. But what I really stuck with me was, and I'm horrible with stats, which is why I'll never be like a history teacher or anything like that, but the amount of women that like go through a termination is like, the statistics are very high, like to have experienced that at least one time in your life. But it's not like something you're just like going to happy hour and you're like, I just had an abortion. Like, no, it's like private. It's very secretive. It's like very not talked about.
But I also feel like the same thing happens when you have a miscarriage or an unplanned loss too, right? That, or even the hope that you had with even when you're in a place when you have a partner, and especially for those of us that have gone through IVF or other types of things like that, where you're spending so much money and you're invested in the hope and the idea, and that massive loss to just drop out of your intentional plan to become a parent, right? And just thinking about how that really affects people, and how that can lead to symptoms of depression and even anxiety about going into more and more rounds of IVF and stuff like that. So like I definitely understand like some of the challenges that people experience. And even though I'm sorry, I heard the timer go off, but you were talking and then I didn't want to lose my thoughts, so I'm gonna let you go.
Does that mean that I'm doing a little homage? Is it
Well,
homage or?
I think you did it last time, so I just want to let you know that this show is brought to you by Bougie Butter, a Black woman-owned business that handcrafts natural skincare products to promote self-care for your skin and your soul. It's based out of Los Angeles, California.
So check out Bougie Butter. And Denise I actually DM'd her, D Martel, who's on now. She's getting her
Winner,
today.
the winner of our first.
Way. So hey, she's gonna be having that smooth skin.
Yes, can't wait for you to get your shipment. We're so happy that you're our winner and that you're here for our second episode. So double thank you.
In that VIP package later, like she's been around since day one. So thank you.
I love the day ones being down for us today. I can't wait. Oh, she said she can't wait to get it.
Boop, boop. Okay, did you want to finish your thought though, or did you finish your thought?
I think I'm done for now, and I'll let you go to the next thought.
Okay. I had a thought too, and this pregnancy brain is just like, whew. But what I will say is, damn it! Oh, why is this happening?
Okay, I'll pick up then. Okay.
And I hope it comes.
pick up, you just give me a finger and I'll let you back in. All right. So I think that one of the things that also happens, so we're talking about IVF. We're talking about, you know what, one of the things that somebody actually sent in my comments when I asked the question, like, describe your fertility journey in 3 words, right? Mine might be drunken, fun, surprise, right? 3 easy peasy words to describe kind of how I got pregnant each time, which is very interesting because it is proof that I clearly need to be doing something different about my intentions with having kids, right? But I think that there's also something that one person said, which is 1 in 4. And I think that that is something that is very realistic, that the average person who has a pregnancy, that 1 in 4 pregnancies are lost, and that it's something that we don't normalize, that we don't really often talk about. And you were also talking about kind of like the secrecy of it, that maybe sometimes people didn't know that you were pregnant before and they don't know that you had a loss. It's interesting because I told you that I had a pregnancy loss in between my first and second kids, and it really threw me for a loop, and I didn't realize that I didn't really tell very many people, because we actually did tell like our close friends that we were pregnant. My husband was telling everybody, and I didn't think that we were going to lose the pregnancy, and we did. And everyone kept asking me afterward, hey, are you okay, are you okay? And I'm really like, if I don't want to talk, I'm like, I'm not going to talk. But like, it was almost equally as uncomfortable for me to kind of like have that experience. And I didn't really understand it at the time. And when you think about adding science into your pregnancy, and knowing that you don't know how these things are, that this is just naturally, right? So like adding science in there also creates so many different variables that you genuinely don't know what could potentially happen.
Okay, that was my signal. I love. I will do 2 thoughts too, because I do have 2 thoughts. And the first one is, I love that question of like describe your fertility journey, because vicariously, I think I would have used other words to describe like just it as a whole, because I know other friends have felt very stressed and very a lot of pressure to perform and to deliver, whether it's like familial pressure or societal pressure. Because it's like once you tell people, oh, we're trying to have a baby, people are like, are you pregnant, are you pregnant? And it's like, and then as a friend, it's like, do you keep checking in, or do you kind of give them space? And so I feel like that piece of like, how do you support someone who, once they've been open enough to say, I'm ready now to get pregnant, like how do you not add the pressure but also like be a support? So and then my second thought I wanted to talk about, as we were talking about just like as a loss, is my friend Ingrid Granados, which I hope you watch this eventually, Ingrid, and I wish that you were here. But well, a common thing that I've heard her say a bunch of times is like how like indigenous women, it was just a way, that was more of a way of life, especially back in the day. Indigenous women just like either having full-term pregnancies and losing a baby because of like lack of healthcare, or or just like having miscarriages like because of poor nutrition, or maybe it's just because of like the life that they're living, you know, like there's probably a lot of different reasons. But then how that can like transpose into like a generational trauma thing, like if there's a whole, you know, world of women that experience like a larger levels of pregnancy loss and infertility, how does that then, you know, carry on a cellular level and energetically into like our generation now? Like our moms and our grandmas like all had like much more loss than we did. Just like how does that like even equate like to our situation now?
Well, I also think that in the generations previously, that they didn't have the levels of birth control that we have now. And so I think that there was a lot more, like, so then your frequency of being able to become pregnant was greater. Whereas even if you, where you would get pregnant more often, but at the same time, you would lose more pregnancies because of the amount of people that you had in, that you could potentially carry, and the normalization of how that was as well, and that you weren't paying for your kids to do everything. Then your kids were helping you with other things in those generations too. So the idea of having a large family like that, if I can barely afford to feed the 3 kids I have now, right? Like, so I could imagine having 10. Like, when I hear about people that have that many kids, I'm like, how do you feed all those people? What do they eat? With even just with the picky eaters. Okay, we're not going to talk about that today. But what we are going to talk about is that there was a huge difference between that. But I also think, and even in today's time, right? We're not even talking about Indigenous women. We're talking about Black women that go to hospitals at fucking Cedars-Sinai, and they are not giving them adequate health treatment. Not believe. Serena Williams said that she had so much pain during her pregnancy and during that experience, and the doctors ignored her. She has like a bazillion Wimbledon cups.
I cannot wrap my head around this conception that like Black women can, and maybe brown too, can take more pain, and how that's a bias. Like, how did that even become a thing?
She's married to a billionaire, and they still were not believing that she was in pain and having very serious health conditions. So you think about that in terms of like what pregnancy loss looks like, the silencing of it, the belief that Black and brown women can carry the entire world on their shoulders. No thanks, we don't need that responsibility. What we really need is community. What we really need is support. What we really need is access to adequate health care, mental health care, to be able to support all the things that go along with it. And I think that there's a part of it that's like, how then do you not even give us the access to being able to create the children that we do want when we are ready, and having the resources to be able to even use IVF, to even have a fertility journey that may be more complex than a traditional, birth that wouldn't need to have any support. But I think that there's something to it that, what do you think we should do?
Well, like I said in the beginning and before we got on, is like I really think about this topic through the lens of like a supportive friend and a support, and not that I'm exempt from experiencing it, but I'm not having any more kids. I'm gonna have 4. So but I think I'd love to hear like your take, and I have a few thoughts of like how can you be a supportive how do you be a supportive a supportive friend, family member? What does it look like to not overstep boundaries and add pressure, but also be mindful and cognizant of like and empathetic of what someone's going through? Like tip wise, like what do you think people should maybe take with them today in terms of like how to navigate the world as a friend?
So I've had friends at various different fertility experience journeys, and have had very, very varying losses. And I feel like I treat each of them differently because they're all different people and they all need something different from us. I have a friend who had been engaging in IVF for like, and just like the fertility treatments and the shots and like the peeing on the stick to check all, ovulation charts and all that stuff for about 3 years, and just consistent losses, and just watching them go through that. I gave her space because I think that's what she needed, because I think that she was really hoping that it would happen. And another friend, she I feel like we all kind of experienced this loss simultaneously. Had a full-term pregnancy that didn't make it, and I feel like the entire community was a part of that. There was that was a totally different situation. And so how I was able to show up for them was first by asking them what they needed. What do you need from me right now as your friend? I think that sometimes when we try to treat everyone like a one-size-fits-all poncho, that they don't always.
Swap meet, but you love to wear anyways. Okay.
I just got a poncho this week. But the point is that like I like to make jokes when I'm talking about something sad sometimes, you guys, just so you get to know me a little bit. Because
quick sidebar, Lauren was like, we look too happy on this flyer, and I was like, I know, I had such mixed feelings. I'm like, but then that's just like adds to the stigma too of like we have to look sad when we're talking about this issue. So like we are, I know our affect doesn't match the topic a little bit at times, but we are trying to keep it
open.
deep, but like, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Open. We want to be open, and we also want you to know that like one of the other things that we also realize too is that with loss also comes something that you could potentially gain. So one of the things that I love is the idea of a rainbow baby. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
So the rainbow baby concept is the baby that you have after a major loss or a series of losses, and it's the idea that like the sun is coming out after your stormy day, right? I love that idea, and that these like rainbow babies come, and then they're a part of your experience in your life, and not that you forget about the ones that you lost, but that there is an honoring of it. One of the other things that I was told after my own loss was to the baby that you had in your body, give it a name, right? That like to name it, even if you didn't know the gender, even if it was beforehand, to kind of like be able to personify that experience, and give honor to your loss and to your gains and to whatever movement is going to happen next in your life. So those are some of the best practices that I've heard of. I'm sure that there are 100,000 other ones. Um,
I,
but
yeah, I here I go with my two thoughts. One, my mom lost like exactly 1 year before I was born. She lost a baby 9 days after giving birth, and she recently, wasn't until like literally like a couple months ago, I was talking to her about this topic, and I said I heard, I didn't know it was called a rainbow baby, but I said I heard that it can be like this really significant closure and feel really good, when you do conceive again and then have a full term healthy pregnancy. And she was like, oh my God, 100%. She was like, that's what I needed. She's like, I cried every single day until that happened for a year. And so that is true. And in terms of a tip, I think mine is more of a generalized tip, but I think my go-to is to really be a good listener, is to really listen, and that goes hand in hand with like what they might need, so of course, like Lauren said, asking, but just just being there for someone, and just letting them know that like if they need to vent, if they need to cry, if they need to be angry, just being like a really non-judgmental listener, I think can go a long way, because I think a lot of people do give their 2 cents, and like that's not helpful. Like sometimes when
what
you're
are some things that you think that you would hear that you would be like,
cringing, well, at least you have, like, the whole, well, at least you have this. Like, don't go there. Don't ever like say, well, at least, like, don't do that. I would say.
what's another cringy?
And I would say everything's gonna, like, you're fine, like, be strong. Like, I don't know, what does being strong even mean? Like, when people say be strong, does that mean like don't cry? Like, what does that mean? So I am very hesitant to tell people to like be strong during that time, because it's like, you know what, maybe you need to have some days where you don't feel strong, you feel weak, maybe you need to cry, maybe you need to do whatever you need to do, and that's not feeling, acting, or being strong in those moments.
But I think that that is a sign of strength, to be able to feel comfortable and confident, to be able to release your emotions, right? That's something that holding on to it doesn't change your experience. It doesn't change that it didn't happen, right? It's just that I think that also getting a mental health professional to talk to about it could be really useful, especially if you feel like it's affecting you past a year, or if you feel like it's still something that's blocking you from being able to really achieve that goal. And I think that we're also talking about people who are intentionally trying to get pregnant, who are going through the process, who or even just who may not have known that they were exactly going to do that. And I just think that there's just so many different ways to see this, and I'm hoping um, that we're giving you guys some real things that you can use to support each other.
Okay, one more thing before we go and before I play our outro music is I would say I totally agree with everything Lauren just said. And I would say you don't have to hit a benchmark for how long you've been sad for. You can start day 2. Like, you experience a loss, or you realize you're gonna have to enter a fertility journey and it's gonna be harder than expected. Get your ass in therapy, because we believe in it, but it's also like it's really nice to have an outlet to process everything that's going to come up for you. And I would say get on
And
that.
and having a trained like therapist that is going to be there to listen
Biased.
can be everything. It can be game changing. You know, that's one of the main reasons we also started the podcast, was to promote and normalize mental health therapy, mental health treatment, mental health conversations, even conversations about things that feel taboo in our community, like fertility journeys and things like that. And so we just want to, you know, break down the stigma here. We want to be able to talk about it. We want to be able to leave it on the table. We want to also open this up for you all to like leave conversations, leave questions in our chat. Ask us questions. We're here for you. We started this to be able to really give everyone the opportunity to feel heard.
And share with someone who you think would enjoy this conversation, and DM us and follow the official Hey Boo.
Yes, follow the official Hey Boo. It's all up and going, and we're going to this on YouTube. We're going to try it on iTunes soon. So just stay tuned for more info.
Adios. So the last Saturday of every month we'll be on IG Live. Tell your friends. Tell your mom.
In March.
All right, I'm gonna hopefully do what I've never done before, which is end this. What do I do?
How do I end?
Oh yeah, end it and then save it.
Okay, live now. Okay, hold on.
Eric,